My name is Camille Hoffman. I'm an artist, and my practice spans a range of mediums. I'm formally trained as a painter, and through my painting practice, I've expanded into working with alternative collage-based material as well as immersive installation. The more I began to think about my work and the histories I wanted to talk about and the stories I wanted to tell, I began to explore how my specific choice of materials, in addition to the traditional materials of paint, can also expand upon my language, my vocabulary as an artist, and also offer additional entry points for my audience to speak about very nuanced and layered histories. This show has been a part of an ongoing conversation with Robert Sparrow Jones. The past 3 years, we've been wanting to collaborate, and there was a sort of organic evolution with the way that I was thinking about my practice and responding to the space here, as well as some projects that were emerging as I was developing the concept of the show outside of our collaboration. Just in my work in general, I deal a lot with themes of water and movement of people across time, and this is a through line with a lot of my work. I also respond when I'm invited to do a show, thinking about, as a visitor on a land, I learn a lot from, where I'm invited to be, responding to the architecture of the space, speaking with people within this community, and responding energetically to what I receive. So there are a few formal things about this space that have also informed the way that I have developed my own ongoing interests in water and how I wanted to bring it into this gallery specifically. A lot of my work is, I would consider, a response and a critical conversation with the romantic American landscape and the way that it's been evoked throughout kind of American history, particularly around, these sorts of conversations like manifest destiny and this pristine land for the taking, that in very violent ways historically has erased Native people and people of color in this country. I think a lot about that as, in many ways, this sort of baggage that I inherit as an American and painter trained here. And I feel it's something that I want to respond to in my own way by acknowledging and embracing the beauty of landscape that I very much in a deep personal way connect to, while also unpacking these more nuanced layers of history and human presence and indigenous presence. So I also find that beauty is a very important and potent tool for inviting people in. As humans, we need beauty. We're drawn to beauty. And how can beauty also be a teacher and a entry point for looking more closely? As an artist, my body is very involved in how I make work, especially working large scale. It almost becomes a dance. I'm in the zone, so I'm just We were joking about how at the end of the day, I don't even realize how much exercise I got until I'm like sore. And I'm like, what happened? I was up and down ladders. I was just so focused on what I was doing. And I realized I was, getting my steps in all throughout the space. I work with a large scale spray gun, like a pneumatic spray gun, to get these like gestural kind of airbrush strokes on the wall. And it's different than when I'm up close. Like there's movement, of course, with my hand and with my arm, like painting. But when I'm using my whole body with this tool, it's my favorite way of bringing that energy of movement into the space, to my work. One of the projects that was happening while I was planning for this is a collaboration with my husband, and we are sort of doing a little bit more research into the history of shell middens. Middens are sites that are found across the globe in indigenous coastal communities, and reflect the deeper history, based on shellfish and how they're not only, just consumed by the inhabitants of that region, but also the way in which their shells are revered and accumulated. These sites are also ways that sort of like we can trace the presence of indigenous people and in these coastal communities back thousands of years. My husband, who his lineage is connected to indigenous called Long Island, and my family indigenous to the Philippines. I am a Filipino American. My family comes from several different continents around the globe, and from my father's side, Russian, Polish, Jews. From my mom's side, the Philippines. I was raised in a Latino community. I speak Spanish, though. Kind of a typical American story. But for this particular work, I've been thinking a lot about the deeper seafaring history of my family from the Philippines, and the larger legacy, going back thousands of years of, trade between folks from Oceania on into more recent but impactful and quite violent histories of American and Spanish colonialism. I've been thinking a lot about also, how these roots still sort of translate into the larger legacy of overseas workers, which constitutes the majority of labor that is export labor from the Philippines. And so in that, as I'm thinking about the history of deeper geological and indigenous history of middens, it was kind of accumulation of time, accumulation of land and the way that geography is built. I'm also thinking about how the memory of people who move through and across water can translate and can speak throughout many timelines, between many timelines. So in these specific works, for example, as one of my collage materials is working with nurses' gowns. I'm using them and applying them in a painterly way, but thinking about, again, that legacy of overseas workers from the Philippines. Yeah, majority of the healthcare industry here primarily constituted of, many Filipinos, nurse practitioners and doctors, and thinking about a lot of the ways in which my story in my present day life, with my contemporary community, also speaks to a much deeper rooted history of time and ancestry. Teaching is a really important part of my practice as an artist. I don't see it as separate. As I make, I'm constantly learning. As I'm teaching, I'm constantly thinking about art and the evolution of making. It's a very humbling practice because when I'm in the classroom with my students, I get to, sort of retrace my steps of how I learned something, that maybe in the moment I'm taking for granted, but I did have to sort of start at the beginning too as a student myself. So that ongoing conversation, and I see my role as a professor, I as someone who, imparting knowledge in some way and sharing what my experiences, but it also just as importantly is an exchange. And I learn just as much from my students as they learn from me. And I would say the most rewarding thing about that is being able to witness, in real time, my students' creative growth and processing and how their own path begins to unfold, and their own vision begins to unfold in their art making practice. I come from a family of artists, and I've had teachers over the years who recognized my interests and my inclinations towards art, and really encouraged that. And knowing what a difference it made to have mentors who saw me when I was also in a space where I wasn't necessarily seen by everybody. I was kind of the quiet kid who did a lot of drawing, but to also have folks in my life who could share with me, like, and I see you, and you have a gift, and you should, pursue this, was invaluable. And so, I feel it's a kind of pay it forward for me. I naturally I love to teach, and it's a part of who I am, and it also feels like a completion of a cycle, or the ongoing kind of circle of exchange. And my grandmother, Shoshana, I was very close with her until I was about 10 when she made her transition to the other side. And she also always exposed me to artsy things. She was a painter. When I was at her house, she had art projects and all kinds of antique knickknacks that I could play with and make stuff with. And so I really credit her specifically for inspiring me to be an artist and to want to continue to pursue that. How have I defined success? Yes, I would say that my definition of success has evolved dramatically over the years. I think earlier in my career, I sort of imagined what a successful artist looks like, being in New York, having these shows, getting a certain level of recognition and representation. And those things are wonderful. I don't want to dismiss any of that. But I would say that as I've grown and as I've gone through more of life and some pretty real just experiences that have not always been the easiest, but have also been the most revelatory. I've come to learn that success cannot and must not be defined by the outside world. That's always beautiful, and that can mirror and affirm what's already going on within, as far as one's own assertion of their integrity and values. I make because I love to, and nothing makes me happier. And I also take my practice very seriously, even when no one else is looking. And so if I put on a show and there are aspects of it that no one else will notice, but I know that I put that care into it, I've been successful. I've created something that is speaking to, with clarity and with vision, what my intentions are. That's successful. I would say though that, separate from just needing, like the validation is different than going to that my work is communicating something. Because that communication and deep and meaningful connection is important to me, because I also know that as an artist, I don't operate in a vacuum. I have my own internal process that lends itself to how I create and why I create and how I continue to push on, regardless of what's going on outside of me. At the end of the day, when I do receive opportunities to exchange with people and to hear that my work has spoken to them in some way or has affirmed something in their own practice, whatever that may be, then I know that I've been successful. Make because you want to, and make what excites you. And also, don't get too caught up in things being exact too soon, because sometimes in those mistakes, as you continue to learn, you might discover something new that will expand upon not only what you're making, but why you're making it. It's sometimes those funny quirks or those funny obsessions that become part of your voice as an artist. And so I think it's important to pay attention to just learning about you, learning about who you are, what you make as an artist, but who you are holistically as a human, and what are the things that keep you going and keep you motivated. Not everyone around you is cheering you on. You can cheer yourself on, and you can push through for you. If you want to be an artist, if you want to make installations, it doesn't have to come through a formal gallery, through a formal museum. Maybe ultimately that's where you want to go, and that's great. Start with thinking about even more expansive. Start thinking more expansively about what site can look like for you, what community can look like for you. Find people who you can collaborate with, who excite you, and who you also equally excite around ideas, and find alternative spaces. That's where you can start to build upon your work and build upon your vocabulary as an artist, and really bring people into that fold. That is from that place, organic things and really exciting things can emerge through those exchanges, things that you can't necessarily predict. But I would just say, find your people, collaborate, and think outside of the box in terms of where and how you can show your work. It's been such an honor and pleasure to work with you all, and to learn from you, and to be here for the first time on the beautiful PSU campus. And I hope, it is my hope and my intention that this work supports the community and creates many avenues for deeper conversations and exchanges and collaborations.